Are we on? Good morning. I wanted to ask, there's a large room of people. I just wanted to make sure I realized that my cell phone had not been silenced. If everyone could just take a moment and make sure that your phones are silenced. The hearing board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is now in session. Today is Thursday, June 6th, 2019. Time is just after 9:00 a.m. and we are meeting in the hearing board room in Diamond Bar. But before we begin today's hearing, I wish to take a moment to honor the medical member of our hearing board, Dr. Roger Lerner, who passed away over the weekend. Dr. Lerner honorably served this board and the community of the South Coast District for 3 years. He was humble and he was eager to learn, and we are fortunate to have had his wisdom and unique perspective. Dr. Lerner will be greatly missed, and we will adjourn the hearing later today in Dr. Lerner's honor. I now wish to call the oh, sorry, Senator, would you like to say a few words?
Dr. Lerner was my seatmate and a beautiful person, cared sincerely about the people that he represented. He worked at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. He's a professor of medicine, came from meager beginnings, and made himself the person who he finally became, a public servant, a lover of the community. And I got to know him well because whenever I had an ailment, I turned to the doctor, and he would give me health care for free. Anyway, he's going to be missed. I would talk to him from time to time in recent months to see how he was coming along. He seemed to have been doing good, but got a setback. We're going to miss him, you bet. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, I'm going to call today's calendar, which we have one hearing for today, and that is the South Coast AQMD versus Sunshine Canyon Landfill, case number 3448-14 for a status report and modification of the order for abatement stipulated. And who is representing the executive officer this morning?
Good morning, hearing board members. Nicholas Sanchez on behalf of the executive officer.
Good morning, Mr. Sanchez. And who is representing Sunshine Canyon Landfill?
Good morning. Tom Bruin for Respondent Browning Ferris Industries of California.
Thank you, Mr. Bruin, and good morning. I'm going to ask at this time anyone who wishes to testify or be heard in today's hearing, including any members of the public who are present, to please rise to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Before we get started, I believe we have a number of documents that we should mark. And just to remind everyone present why we are here today, we last continued this hearing due to, thank you. Thank you. At the last hearing, we learned of a, I'll wait. Okay, so this is one packet? Okay. I believe it was 2 occasions with a number of complaints and NOVs which had not been present for a long time. And so we wanted to just adjourn and continue the hearing, and we asked as a board, the parties to come back for three items. Number 1, any complaints and or notices of violation that are issued between that date and today's date. Any testimony from Republic with regards to odors resulting from trenching associated with the installation of horizontal wells and what additional measures may be implemented to reduce future odors, and each party's position as to a possible extension, if necessary, of the existing order. And so I assume that's, in addition to anything else that the parties wish to report on, that we will go in that direction today. We've received a district presentation and it has on the top the AQMD letterhead, and it is Sunshine Canyon Landfill Abatement Order Progress Report, June 6, 2018, and we will mark that as number 73, exhibit number 73. For the district, we also received a PowerPoint presentation from Sunshine Canyon entitled 2019 Sunshine Canyon Landfill Action Plan Update, also with today's date. And that will be U as in umbrella, U, 3 U's. We have a number of public exhibits, and they were given to us in a nice order. First, I'll mark, we have received a green folder packet. I believe that's from Mr. Wade Hunter, entitled Stipulated Order of Abatement Hearing with the case number and today's date, Wade Hunter, President of North Valley Coalition of Concerned Citizens, Inc., and we will mark that as Public Exhibit P173, P173. And then I'll look at, in order of how I received them, additional public exhibits. We have an email from Mr. Nicholas Sanchez to Wade, Sunshine Canyon Landfill Hearing Board case number dated March 24th, 2019 at 2:35 p.m., and we'll mark that as Public Exhibit 174. We have an email from Ms. Meg Volk, dated March 28th, 2019 at 11:38 a.m., and we'll mark that as 175, Public Exhibit P. A second email from Meg Volk on March 28th at 11:39 a.m., and we'll mark that as P176. From Ms. Andrea Provenzale, we have an email dated March 28th, 2019, 3:25 p.m. That will be P177. We have from Mr. Wade Hunter an email April 15th, 2019, 9:23 p.m., and that will be P178. Another email from Mr. Wade Hunter, April 15th, 9:43 p.m., and we'll mark that as P179. An email from Jan Subar, June 3rd, 9:47 p.m., and we'll mark that as P180. Another email from Ms. Meg Volk, June 4th, 4:22 p.m., and that will be marked as P181. An email from David Edminster, June 4th, 6:06 p.m., and that will be P182. From Arline Melkonian, an email June 5th, 2:14 p.m., that will be P183. An email from Zenginut, June 5th, 11:28 a.m., and that will be P184. An email from Carol Andreas, and June 5th, 2:50 p.m., and that will be P185. An email from Chelsea Lavino, June 5th, 3:29 p.m., and that will be P186. An email from Irma Eskandari, June 5th, 4:40 p.m., that will be P187. An email from Haraj, June 5th, 4:44 PM. That will be P188. An email from Bill Cotter, June 5th, 5:47 PM, and that will be P189. An email from Yasaman, June 5th, 6:43 PM, and that will be P190. Another email from Andrea Provenzale, June 5th, 7:47 PM, and that will be P191. An email from Terry Lee Romine, and that will be, June 5th, 8:50 PM, and that will be P192. An email from Adrienne Biondo, June 5th, 11:08 PM, and that will be P193. An email from Roxy Dukmajian, and that's June 6th, 1:20 AM, and that will be P194. Another email from Mike Mohajer, I think we had one before, June 6th, 2:44 AM, and that is P195. And finally, I think the last one, from Arena Coleman, an email, June 6th, 5:49 AM, and that will be P196. And the board will definitely take a break a little bit longer than the normal break this morning to make sure that we have adequate time to review all the public comments. And in the meantime, I have one other, we have several speaker cards, and if there's anyone else who has not yet filled out a speaker card, if you wish to do so, please, they're in the back, and you can hand them to the clerk of the board. We have one speaker card from Jessica Strobel, who is here representing the LA City Council District 12. And I wonder, you may choose to, are you Ms. Strobel? You may choose to address the board earlier in the hearing, or if you'd like to address the board at the time we normally take a public comment, which will be towards the very end. Okay. Then with that, I will take opening statements, first from Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair Prusak. First, I just want to speak on, which I've brought to the board's attention before, the numerous public comments that are submitted when we start these status hearings each time. In no way am I diminishing their value or their authenticity, but without people attending, which I understand is quite a challenge where this community is located, and us having hearings here during the week at this time and the number of hearings we had. But evidentiary, for evidentiary purposes, it is a challenge for the district to respond to these when we receive them at this time contemporaneously. As we put into the evidence and in the record in this matter, we have a very detailed odor verification policy. These comments do not go through that policy. So just to reiterate that, these should be weighed with that in mind, because we do not have the ability to verify or respond to these, and we cannot authenticate the information that's represented in them.
Thank you. That's a very valid point, Mr. Sanchez. And I should ask, Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Bruin, have you not seen the comments either before this morning? And if that's the case, we should probably take a break for you both to also review those comments if you wish.
We have not seen these. I've scanned through them. Typically, the comments that are related to the Community Advisory Committee or some of the other committees where the district does attend and participate, I am aware of the issues that are going on or things that come up before the various agencies that have jurisdiction over the Landfill. But when people comment about an experience they had on a specific date or something like that, absent, if it went through the complaint process, it's something that we could research, but to answer your question, no.
Okay. And would you like some time before? We could take that time before.
I was able to scan them, mostly they express generalized concerns rather than complaints about specific dates. So I have a pretty good sense of what's in there. So I'll be happy to take a little time to review them over whatever break we have this morning.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Sanchez. You may continue.
Thank you, and I'll do the same during the break. We were last before the board on March 6th, I believe. 2 notices of violation had been issued. The evidence and testimony was that they were related to trenching occurring at the landfill. The landfill's witnesses indicated that they had modified their operations in reaction to that and had put in a filter, so to speak. The district is not aware of any additional complaints that have resulted in an NOV since that event. Following the last hearing, though, however, March 19th, there was another NOV issued on March 26th. The district inspector who issued that NOV will be testifying regarding what the complaints were, the investigation, and the resulting NOV that was issued. Following the last hearing, I believe there was only 3 to 4 submissions required under the order for abatement. Those submissions did occur timely. Mr. John Anderson will be testifying regarding his review of those submissions, and the district's expert, Mr. Eugene Sang, is also present, and he will discuss his review of the operations of the gas collection system, the dewatering of the wells, and the other technical documents that were submitted and the data contained as I just described. The district will reserve its position on the extension of the order following all the submission of the evidence to be able to gauge where we're at. I can report that complaints continue to decline. We will provide evidence on that. For the most recent month of May, the district received 2 complaints alleging the landfill as the source of odors. 12 complaints the month before?
The previous month was 12.
Yes, and in the month of April, the district received 12 months alleging the landfill as a source of odors. The district will also present evidence following the concern of the board as well as of the district and its executive management. Had things changed there or was something happening that may be indicating that there may be possibly a ongoing nuisance going on based upon the record that we had previously, but we were having a bump in complaints and the issuance of 2 NOVs. We will provide testimony on how the district compliance staff responded to that concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Mr. Bruin, your opening.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I had learned from Mr. Sanchez earlier this week that Dr. Lerner had passed away. And I just wanted to say we were very sad to hear that news. He was a very nice man, and we'd like to offer our condolences. With respect to today's hearing, we will present a PowerPoint presentation, which you have copies of. We emailed it to the clerk yesterday and handed out copies this morning. And Ms. Elena Goodall will be presenting that PowerPoint presentation. So I'm not going to go over that now. I'll let her deal with those issues, but just kind of give you a big picture. Since April of 2017, the complaints that the landfill has received have dropped significantly and steadily. There have been 3 notices of violation from the district during that 2-year time period. And just to recap, one was in December of last year, and it related to odors that occurred during the drilling of a well at the landfill. And to respond to that, the landfill had designed and put in use a much larger odor control box to cover the drilling area, which was a one-of-a-kind, unique design, and it has worked effectively, and we haven't had any problems with respect to odors arising from the drilling of wells since that corrective action was taken by the landfill in response to that incident in December of last year. In February of this year, there was a notice of violation related to odors that occurred during the trenching of a horizontal collector into waste. And as the chair of the board mentioned, we were asked to come up with a proposed solution to prevent a reoccurrence of that. We have not since then had to install any horizontal collectors, but we have come up with an approach that we think will effectively minimize odors. We've also beefed up our general response and protocol for dealing with construction activities at the landfill in an effort to control odors. And you'll hear some testimony about the relocation of some waste that I believe was done in April, in which we didn't have any odor complaints by following this new protocol. So we think those corrective actions have been effective and will continue to be effective. And then finally, in March, we had a massive power surge, and massive is not an understatement. It caused both the gas-to-energy plant at the landfill and the flare system at the landfill to go down for a little less than 24 hours. And that did result in quite a number of complaints and a notice of violation. It was literally an act of God, because there was nothing from a technical standpoint that could have been employed at the landfill to avoid the damage that occurred. To my knowledge, we've never had such an incident at the landfill before, hopefully never again. But that did result in an NOV in March. Otherwise, the complaints have leveled off and have been at a fairly low level. And so we feel for that reason that looking at the last 2 years and the landfill's normal operations, there have not been any notices of violation associated with the landfill's normal operations. So with that, I will end my closing statement, and then you'll be hearing from Ms. Goodall in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruin. Mr. Sanchez, you may present your first witness.
Yes, the district would like to call Mr. Gerardo Vergara. Mr. Vergara, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Gerardo Vergara. The way you spell it is Gerardo, last name Vergara, Vergara.
Thank you. Did you take the oath this morning?
I did.
And what is your position at the district?
Air Quality Inspector 2.
And how long have you been employed at the district?
Over a year and 6 months.
And what section in the compliance office are you assigned to?
Toxics, Waste and Management.
Does that include inspection and responding to complaints regarding landfills?
Yes.
Were you assigned to respond to odor complaints alleging Sunshine Canyon landfill as a source on March 26, 2019?
Yes.
And what were you asked to do?
Investigate numerous odor complaints alleging Sunshine Canyon landfill that morning.
And when did the complaints, when were they first received by the district?
The first odor complaint was received at 6:16 a.m. The last one was received roughly at 11 a.m.
And do you know how many total complaints were received during that time frame?
25.
And how were you, if you can explain to us, how were you notified about the complaints and how you're dispatched to respond?
I was notified via email by my supervisor. I received the complainant's information, in which I then contact every single complainant via telephone to see if she or he are home, to essentially confirm if there are any odors in that area.
And what were was there consistency in what the complainants were alleging?
Yes.
And what was it?
Most of them were alleging landfill gas odors.
And what did you do after you contacted the complainants?
Those that did answer, I did meet with them. I did make an approach to meet with them in person and confirm if there are any odors where they called from.
And how many of the complainants were you able to personally meet that day?
I was able to meet personally 3, however, 4 of which were teaching at the time.
Okay. And can you elaborate that on 4 were teaching at the time?
4 odor complaints came from Van Gogh Elementary School, from staff. They were unable to meet with me in person.
Okay. But did you ultimately follow up with them to complete the complaint investigation process?
I did. I met with them in person the following day.
And what time did you arrive on site after you were notified of the complaints?
I was within the community around 7:45 a.m.
And what did you detect when you arrived in the community, and can you walk us through what you did?
Yes, essentially, when I met with some of the complainants, I did detect landfill gas odors.
And how would you describe the intensity of the odor?
They were fairly strong.
And when you met with the three individuals that you identified, did you detect the same level of intensity with each individual?
Yes.
And how far apart were the residences of these three individuals and the school?
They were not too far from each other. I was able to detect odors on Canyon Ridge Lane, which is north, and I was able to detect odors as south as Van Gogh Elementary School.
And did you contact the landfill to let them know you were investigating odor complaints?
I did arrive on site at 11 a.m. to notify them to continue my investigation.
And what did that process consist of?
I arrived to Sunshine Canyon Landfill at roughly 11 a.m. While I was driving up the main haul road, I did detect landfill gas odors. However, by that time, they were very faint. I was greeted by William Carr, who then graciously escorted me to meet with Joshua Mills, who was on site with his team fixing the flares at the time.
Did they give you an explanation of what may have contributed to landfill odors reaching the community?
Yes, they explained to me that Sunshine Canyon Landfill experienced a power surge, which essentially knocked down their flare system and the energy plant adjacent to them.
And so what happened as a result of that power surge?
The result of that power surge knocked down most of their odor mitigation equipment.
Okay. And you indicated that the complaints stopped coming in at 11 a.m. Were you able to detect the reduction in odors coming from the landfill personally?
I did.
And what did you experience?
I experienced that the odors dissipated roughly around noon.
And did you attribute it to any changed operations at the landfill following your inspection?
No.
Okay. Did you do any independent research to try to determine the cause of the power surge that the landfill had described to you?
I reached out to Joshua Mills, who gave me information about the power surge. Indeed, there was a power surge documented by California Edison that occurred, I believe, in Sylmar.
And did you issue a notice of violation based upon your investigation?
I did.
And what was the allegation that the landfill had violated on March 26?
South Coast AQMD Rule 402 and the California Health and Safety Code 41700.
And to confirm, was the school in session, was Van Gogh Elementary School in session on March 26, 2016, while you were conducting your investigation?
They were.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Bruin, any questions?
No questions.
Board members, any questions? Mr. Camarena.
Thank you. Mr. Vergara, when the citizens described the odors to you, did they describe them as landfill gas or just odors?
Most of them did refer to it as landfill gas odors.
There are several kinds of odors that emanate from the landfill. I think last time you were here, I asked you if you could discern the difference. Do you know or have a good feel for whether or not the complainants just used the term landfill gas in general, or specifically they understood that the difference?
I do believe the community knows the difference.
Thank you.
Senator.
Mr. Sanchez asked you a question about the issuing an NOV. I think you said 2016. That's a long time ago. What year did you mean, Mr. Sanchez?
I'm sorry, March 26, 2019.
19, okay. You said that, Mr. Garado, that the complaint described the intensity of the odor as being very strong, did you say? And you had just 7 complaints? 3 from the community and then 4 from the school area?
To elaborate, most of which did.
Pardon?
I'm sorry?
What was your statement?
Most of them did mention it was landfill gas odors, and I was able to meet with 3 of the complainants who I was able to confirm those odors from, and I was able to go to the school and confirm landfill gas odors as well. There were some other complainants who I was able to meet with but was unable to confirm any odors.
And I think you said the time was about 11 a.m.
Is when I arrived to Sunshine Canyon landfill.
That's when you made Sunshine Canyon. And what time did you meet with the complainants?
Between the hours of 7:45 to 10:30.
And what time did the complaints come in?
The district shows that we received the first complaint at 6:16 a.m.
And you got there pretty quickly, apparently.
Yes.
And you only got a total of 7 complaints.
Confirmed. We got a total of 25 odor complaints throughout the day.
Well, we got 25. It's pretty. Would that indicate that the odor was really very strong? The 25 unconfirmed, did it come from the school or did most of them come from the community?
4 of which were confirmed at the school and 3 of them from the community.
I'm not asking about the confirmed one
Oh,
now.
I see.
The number of complaints that came from the community.
Were the rest of the amount. Only 4 came from Van Gogh Elementary.
Sorry, say it again?
The rest of the complaints were from the community.
What was the number of the rest?
21.
Oh, 21 complaints came from the community
Yes.
and 24 came from the school.
4 came from the school.
From the where? Can you
4
speak a little louder, sir?
4 came from the school, 21 from the community.
Okay, and only, how many was confirmed?
7 in total.
All
3.
total, 21, 14. All right. And you said the odor had somewhat dissipated.
It did. Around noon is when I detected the odor to be dissipated when I was conducting.
What time did you what time was it that you made an attempt to confirm the odor claimed by some of the complainants that where it could not be confirmed?
Can you repeat the question?
What time was it that you were unable to confirm the complaints that were made by some of the complainants?
Between the hours of 7:45 to 10:30 while I was conducting my investigation.
So you could, at that time, did you confirm any
Yes, I did.
at that particular time?
I did.
So the odor was still present, not completely dissipated?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Would you happen to know, and probably not, and I'll save this for a public witness, but would you know why, or were you told why a power surge would cause such an extensive shutdown?
I do not know.
Okay, I'll hold that question. Ms. Bird.
And did you get a time at which the power surge took place?
I would have to go look back at my notes. I do know that it happened the prior night.
It happened the night before the complaints came in. Okay. And I have one other question. Let's see. That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Mr. Sanchez, you're our next witness.
Yes, the district would like to call John Anderson. Mr. Anderson, can you please state your name for the record?
John, John, Anderson, Anderson.
Did you take the oath this morning?
Yes.
And what is your position at the district?
My title is Air Quality Analysis and Compliance Supervisor.
And how long have you been employed at the district?
13 years.
Let me just get to one issue that was mentioned in the public comments, and I had mentioned in my opening statement regarding the district conducting additional investigation regarding odor complaints alleging Sunshine Canyon landfill as a source following the last status hearing. Are you aware of any effort by the district to look into that matter?
Yes.
And what's your understanding?
The guidance that we were given was to, for the period between the previous hearing board and the next hearing board, to ask our standby supervisors to dispatch an inspector for one complaint after hours or a weekend if they're available. So that's what our standby supervisors did for April and for May. On one case, the standby supervisor erred and did not seek to call someone out for a single complaint, but in the other cases, efforts were made to find inspectors to go out.
And to be clear, what is the procedure during normal business hours for dispatch of a complaint?
During normal business hours, every complaint is dispatched and responded to as quickly as possible. The first step that an inspector typically takes is to try to make telephone contact with the complainant. In many cases, the inspector, if it's an odor complaint, in the course of discussion with the complainant, will determine, is the odor still ongoing? If the complainant says no, we'll make a record of that, but we will not necessarily send an inspector out to that. There's other things we'll have the inspector do. But we do respond to individual complaints during regular business hours.
Do you have an understanding if the community became aware that we were conducting that additional investigation and response time following the last hearing?
Yes, I believe that they were made aware.
And the public comment that I showed you that was received today, is that consistent, that they were aware of that change?
Yes, I saw that on one email.
Okay. And so following the last hearing, did you look at the complaint data kept and received by the district regarding response to odor complaints?
Yes.
And how many complaints were received by the district in the month of April?
In the month of April, there were 12 complaints received.
And how many in the month of May?
2.
And how many in the month of March?
The month of March was 76.
And how many of those were attributed to the day of March 26th that Mr. Vergara just testified about?
There actually were 26, not 25 on that time. 25 came in during the time period that Mr. Vergara was there. The last one came in at 7:15 p.m. That was prior to us having the guidance from our deputy executive officer to investigate single after-hour complaints for the limited time period. So no inspector was looked for to dispatch for the 7:15. There was no field response.
And regarding the documents submitted by Sunshine Canyon Landfill in compliance with the conditions in the order, did you review any of those submissions by the landfill?
Yes.
First, I'd like to ask you about the food waste and organics diversion program submittals. Did you review those documents?
Yes.
And what did they indicate?
They indicated compliance with the order for abatement in terms of food waste. I did find a typographical error in there that the landfill was able to clear up. They actually did better, significantly better than what the typo showed, so that was corrected.
Okay. And what about the tonnage received by the landfill? Did you review those documents?
Yes.
And what did they indicate?
I think 2 of them showed lower tonnage than last year. One of them showed increased tonnage. There was 2 and 1. I didn't really see a pattern there.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Before I turn it to Mr. Bruin and the board for questions, since you did relate to one of the public documents, I think this would be an appropriate time for us to take a short break to review public comments, and then we'll come back on with any questions we may have. So, board members, let's take 10 minutes, and if we need more, we'll go from there. But let's take 10 minutes off the record to just review some public comments. Thank you. We're off the record. We're back on the record, and obviously we took a little bit longer. There were quite a number of comments. I wanted to just say two things before we start with questions for Mr. Anderson. First, I just wanted to thank the community for all of these comments. They're very important to us and to the process. But I wanted to also reiterate Mr. Sanchez's point from his opening statement, which is they are hearsay. And the district and the respondent are at a disadvantage in not being able to question any of the witnesses who comment, well, they're not witnesses, but the community members who comment, or investigating the allegations, as Mr. Sanchez pointed out. So let's view them as such, and I think their best use is probably to allow us to ask questions of witnesses who are present for any issues that may be raised that are of concern to us. Mr. Broom, with that, do you have any questions for Mr. Anderson?
No, thank you.
Board members, questions for Mr. Anderson? I had questions with regard to, if you could just give us a little bit of a better overview of the month of March, the 50, I believe it's 50 additional complaints that were received in March, whether any of them were verified. I guess that'd be my first question.
Yes, some were verified, many were not verified, and a number of them were no field response.
Do you have any dates on those that were verified so that perhaps we could, at some point when Republic is testifying, have some idea of what they might have arisen from?
Yes, I can read from the data that we put on our websites monthly. For March, the first time, according to our data, that landfill gas was verified was on Sunday, March the 10th. This was in the evening. It appears that there were 10 complaints. 2 of them, right around 10:55 and 10:56 p.m., landfill gas was verified according to our data. The next time was on Sunday, March the 17th. There were 11 complaints, and those came in from 8:06 p.m. to 11:10 p.m., and I believe 4 were verified as landfill gas. The rest shows that there was nothing verified. And then on the 26th, we had a number of them that were verified. And that's it for March.
Of verified complaints. So that would mean the total verified, if I had my numbers right, not including the ones on the 26th, there were 6.
I didn't total them, but that sounds about right.
Okay. And in the notes that you have, do you have any indication that was given by Republic of what might have been going on at on those 2 dates?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have questions?
Madam Chairman,
Oh.
if you would indulge me, may I make a brief statement?
Sure.
It'll be very brief.
Okay.
Today is the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and a great crusade was launched to preserve the freedom of all of us here. And Senator Holden, you're a World War II vet, as was my father, most of my uncles. All of them came home, not all of them intact, and I just wanted to say thank you, sir, for our freedom. I don't expect any quarter from your questions, but I do want to thank you.
Thank you for that statement, and thank you for your recognition of this day. And thank you also, on behalf of the board, Senator Holden, for your service.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone have any additional questions? Thank you very much. Mr. Sanchez, your next witness.
Yes, the district would like to call Eugene Sang to testify, please. And I believe I provided the board members, it's marked, I believe, as Exhibit 73, which is Mr. Sang's PowerPoint.
I did notice it is 2018, but I assume it's 2018.
Yes, that is incorrect. And Madam Clerk, if I can have the monitor, I can. Thank you. Mr. Stang, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Eugene Tsang, E-U-G-E-N-E, T-S-E-N-G.
Did you take the oath this morning?
Yes, I did.
And who are your current employers, Mr. Sang?
South Coast Air Quality Management District, specifically for this abatement order. Federal government, Navy, for looking at international best management practices for solid waste management. The City of Los Angeles Local Enforcement Agency, and the Sunshine Canyon Landfill Local Enforcement Agency. Also work for several large consulting companies as an independent contractor, primarily with large clients like LA Metro and the LA International Airport, developing organics programs for them. I'm also a law professor, engineering professor with UCLA Extension, and I also teach law at University of West LA School of Law. I teach international environmental law and policy, and recently I was sworn in as the Deputy Chief of Police of the Environmental Branch for the Gabrielino Tongva tribe, where I'm developing the criminal and civil enforcement infrastructure for that nation.
Thank you, Mr. Sang. Does the AQMD, and you mentioned one of your employers, Sunshine Canyon Landfill Local Enforcement Agency, do they collaborate on evaluating the mitigation measures in the abatement order?
Yes, this has been an ongoing effort for many, many years, and the interagency committee consists of city and county planning, public works, public health, county public health, the city and county attorney's office, and the Enforcement Agency Council, and a number of other entities.
And are you retained as an expert by the South Coast Air Quality Management District to review the technical documents submitted by the landfill pursuant to the conditions in this order?
Yes.
And what documents, if any, did you review to prepare for your testimony today?
The landfill gas monitoring wells, the number of installations, and the number of pumps, the status of each well. I also look at the monthly Rule 1150.1 emissions monitoring data. Also follow the organics reports, and in addition, look at the landfill gas volumes that are collected.
And how often do you visit Sunshine Canyon Landfill?
Typically about once a week, sometimes more, depending on the situation, sometimes less.
And when was your last visit to the landfill?
May 31st, I went by the landfill.
And did you prepare a PowerPoint to summarize your review of the data you mentioned and to indicate the status of the landfill to the hearing board?
Yes.
Can you please go through your presentation for us?
So the date should be 2019. And I'm going to have to talk to my student intern for the summer about this cover page. So, okay, wait. So, in a few quick slides, I'm going to go over the analysis on the data and on the alternative daily cover, the intermediate cover enhancement project, the improvements to the landfill gas collection system, and basically the impact of all these things put together, because the approach that was put together is a systems engineering, which means a very holistic approach using a combination of best management practices, basically saying that every little bit helps. So from a pictorial standpoint, at the top picture is the start of the abatement order, so that's October 2016. And the middle picture is August 2017, when by that time most of the mitigation measures have been put in place in terms of the intermediate cover enhancements and also the alternative daily cover. And the bottom picture is one just taken a couple weeks ago, which reflects the most recent monthly panorama picture that I typically take. And what I want you to take a look at is the top and the bottom of all the changes that has taken place. So the top picture basically shows that the working face is on the extreme far right. Can you use the pointer? So if you look at the extreme top right, that's where the working face is. And you'll notice on the center left, that is the bow area that where the local enforcement agency has identified the source of the highest levels of surface emissions. It's really on that slope, and we call this the bow area. And so with the implementation of the abatement order, particularly the intermediate cover enhancement, you can see by August 2017, all the white material that you see, that is the posi shell. That is the combination of the cement, bentonite clay, and fiber mixture that's sprayed on. And the green and the black towards the center right, towards the lowest half, that is the closure turf, which is basically an impermeable piece of plastic, and then with artificial turf put on top. These are basically temporary measures to help seal the surface where the emissions are coming out from. And this is all designed to enhance, which is the most important part of the mitigation measure, which is the upgrading the effectiveness of the landfill gas collection system. That is the primary mechanism for controlling landfill gas odors. So in 2019, in May, the bottom picture, the other measure that was very significant in really helping mitigate the landfill gas odors, as you see in the center left, in the middle of the picture, you see that dark area? That is from April 2017 till May 2019. There is about 4 million tons of trash there. And that's used as the buffer to put up against that bow area slope so that the landfill gas, as it's being blown out the sides, it actually has a buffer and has the improved landfill gas collection system. A little counterintuitive, but we're actually using increased disposal to mitigate the odors. So it's really the combination of a lot of these things that really made this mitigation measure work. So this is just a comparison of the aerial, because as you go to the landfill, we don't get a bird's eye view like the top part of this picture. You only see at the bottom. You kind of see what at the bottom, and I try to outline on the different colors. The purple is the working face. The little white thing on top is all that is left of the posi shell. So I'm going to go back one slide so you can go see in the middle, see all that white across the middle and the right top. That's all the posi shell. At the bottom picture, there's only a tiny little sliver on top, and if you see on the aerial, it's designated by the little white thing on top of the top picture and also the bottom picture. But everything else is in place. The orange is really another form of the intermediate cover enhancement, which is the vegetative cover, which includes the intermediate cover soil plus imported topsoil and vegetation, which is actually put on top of the existing intermediate cover. And that also serves as a biofilter to react with the methane and the odorous compounds. So this is, and like I said, these are all measures designed to enhance the collection of landfill gas. And just the big comparison from the beginning to the end, just the two pictures, and I have outlined in the red, really the 4 million tons that's used to fill up against that hillside. And remember, in this new area, this new disposal area, they have very enhanced gas collection system with the use of gabion cubes and horizontal wells. And this is the AQMD's tracking of the number of complaints, there was no NOVs and very little complaints for a long time, for almost 18, 19 months. And then in February, March of this year, we had B was related to the drilling and C was related to the trenching. Had one NOV each of those months. And Republic took measures. No, I'm sorry.
Did
A
you say
and
that
B.
correctly?
I'm sorry, A and B. And then C is the one related to the power surge. The power surge was very unusual in terms that is that the power surge actually knocked out it was strong enough to actually knock out the controller, or basically fried the computer boards. The reported surge level was 85 megawatts. And I tried to calculate what this means in average terms that I could understand. So 85 megawatts is typically the energy or the electricity that's used in about 68 to 70,000 homes. And you got that in one instant. And basically, there's probably nothing you could have done in terms of, even with the surge protectors Republic had, it didn't help. It's basically an act of God.
Let me interrupt you, Mr. Sang. How did you do follow-up, or through your employment with the LEA, did you look into or become aware of the event that happened on March 26?
Yes. When a system goes down, that's actually called a special occurrence, and by permit conditions, Republic is actually required to pretty much report that immediately to the LEA, and I get notification. So the local enforcement agency had a group of people follow up on the cause of this failure. And then separately, independently, I am in direct contact with Southern California Edison to follow up and see on the technology side what can be done to prevent this in the future, or what could be done at the landfill to actually have a better level of protection. So that's an ongoing effort, but I followed up in two different ways, totally independent with Southern California Edison, and then separately as a part of a team with the Sunshine Canyon Landfill Local Enforcement Agency. And that is an ongoing effort.
Thank you. Please continue.
And one of the data that we track is when we started this project, it was very important that we try to look at all the different data, because the approach that we put together is a holistic approach. A holistic approach means we're looking at every single thing. So we have to have what we call actionable or technically, scientifically defensible data that we can rely on. So one of the things we track is, well, does the tonnage have anything to do with that, the kind of odors or the level of odors? And actually, in tracking this for a very, very long time, it's pretty conclusive that the amount of tons of trash has nothing to do with landfill gas odors or complaints. And if you look at the next slide, you can see the effectiveness I put a little dotted line. That's kind of the April timeline in 2017, because by then, most of the mitigation measures, the majority of the mitigation measures has already started taking effect. It's still being implemented. It wasn't really done till the end of the year. But even when it started, the measures started getting put in towards the end of February, beginning of March, right after that rainy season, you can see the odors in red just dropped off. And what you see in the blue is the landfill gas collection at the landfill. And then right after, when I say that the magic date when most of the mitigation measures, when they were in and started taking effect, you can see that the landfill gas collection volumes went up significantly. And from January 2016 to January 2019, it's a 62% increase in the landfill gas collection. And that's really the cause and effect. And this is pretty much industry standard. You have to have a good landfill gas collection system.
Let me interrupt you again. So does this have any correlation to the March 26 odor event due to the landfill gas collection system going offline?
Yes. That was, like I said, I think as an act of God, but actually it tells us something, because sometimes we learn more from failure than from continued success. And with the landfill gas collection system going down, you just had all these odors. And I think that really goes to show how important a good landfill gas collection system is. And if you create conditions where the landfill gas collection system doesn't work well, for instance, adding the 9 inches of soil, you basically compromise that system. So basically, if a landfill can keep and maintain a good landfill gas collection system along with other practices, the odors can be under control.
And so your review of the gas well dewatering and the emissions from the grids at the landfill, do they reflect good operating practices in compliance with the conditions of the order for abatement?
Yes. I follow that independently for the local enforcement agency, but also for AQMD. I'm sorry. And then the monthly reporting shows that they're that Republic is actually very diligent in terms of their well maintenance and what we call fine tuning, because every well is individually adjusted every month, and then and the volumes are actually constantly monitored. So, okay, so let me go to the next one here. So, well, you would say, well, isn't this just normal amount of landfill gas collected? Actually not, because of the enhancements that were made, and because of the previous damage that was actually done to the infrastructure of the landfill, there's a lot of catch-up that had to be done. So what I show here is, if in a normal landfill, that dotted line is how much landfill gas you would expect to capture and not have landfill gas problems, gas odor problems. And the green line is really how much Republic is actually now getting with all this enhancements that's done to the cover and making up and actually kind of remediating the damage that was done. So the difference between the blue line and the green line is basically way above what we call normal. So their system is actually operating way above normal collection efficiencies.
Let me ask some follow-up questions on some of the things you said. So you mentioned that landfill gas well system tuning is done manually. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, the landfill is a, well, I call it almost like a living thing, because it's constantly settling, it's constantly decomposed, the organic materials are constantly decomposing, and the transcomposition is different in different locations of the landfill, of course, during different seasons and things like that. That, from a common sense standpoint, you know that the week after Halloween, there's going to be a lot of pumpkins in the waste, right? That's a lot of organic waste. So wherever that trash is put during that period, you're going to have a lot of pumpkins, so you're going to have a lot of decomposition from pumpkin waste.
So when you know, like an event like that, is a landfill operator supposed to go in and turn up all the gas collection vacuum, so to speak, to anticipate that happening, or?
No, it's not doing it ahead of time. You're actually kind of trying to do this real time as close as possible. So if it requires increased volume, then yes.
So is it fair to say there are times that you will get spikes in landfill gas generation, and industry practice is to react to that, but be ready when you may have that surge?
Well known, like if it rains, you're going to get, because of more moisture, you're going to get more gas generation. So there are certain events that you know and you can plan for. So that's part of what we call routine maintenance.
And so you can only prepare so much. There still may be unpredictable events where fugitives may escape from the landfill. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Well, in the case of this landfill, it's primarily because of the 5 years of the non-traditional industry practice of not removing the soil. And that basically, we're trying to make up for it right now. But, I mean, just within a year of the abatement order, you've seen such improvement. This is actually pretty phenomenal, as independently documented and verified by NASA.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So this is actually taken from the local enforcement agency's board of directors meeting last week. As you know, there is an inspector on site basically at all operating hours of the day, every single day the landfill was open. And they submit a weekly report to Cal Recycle on everything they have jurisdiction over. Then every so many months, the state agency actually comes down and does a joint inspection. So in the middle of the page, you see an inspection by Cal Recycle. So that is a state agency actually who certifies the local enforcement agency. They do a co-inspection just to see that everything is done on according to the regulations. So basically, since May 7, from December to May, basically, there's no issues. And this is, and what I'm trying to show here is that the LA really tracks the performance of the alternative daily cover that is being used and the intermediate cover enhancement that is maintained. So one of the most significant things is by statute, a landfill is required to basically take a look at the operating document, which is called the joint technical document. This is basically how a landfill operates and all the standards it goes by. The local enforcement agency every 5 years does a permit review. And so last year, at the end of the last year, that was the time period that the 5-year review came up. And 5 years ago, a lot of these practices that were like the alternative cave, that was not in place. And so what the local enforcement agency did in December was to require Republic to submit a updated joint technical document. That means reflect all the new standard practices. And a lot of these are what was incorporated from the abatement order. And they were required to update that document. And in April, Republic submitted a joint technical document amendment, which means they had to revise all the operational plans to include a lot of these practices. And this document was approved and in May, which was last month, and the public notice posted, which means the use of the ADC and the maintenance of the intermediate cover, the use of the vegetative, that's all now in place and within the jurisdiction of the local enforcement agency. Also from the Sunshine Canyon Board of Directors meeting last Thursday, there's not going to be any backing off on the regulatory oversight or the data compilation or analysis. So there's going to be no change in effort or approach, even if this abatement order expires. So the LAA, this is a continuing effort, and we will be continuing the collaboration with AQMD and all the other regulatory agencies. It's not just collaboration, but the Sunshine Canyon Local Enforcement Agency, in conjunction with NASA, we will actually be holding technical briefings with AQMD staff and also County Public Works and County Public Health about how all these improvements were made and the impact, and how the data analysis was done. So one of the things that's going to come out of this is all the tools that we use to develop the mitigation measures will be shared with all these agencies and made public. At the very bottom, like I said, this is actually an ongoing effort, and I'm happy to say that through a lot of the university contacts, Amazon, which basically does cloud computing and data mining and data analytics, they actually are volunteering some help to help us with managing the tremendous amounts of data that we actually have. So, okay. In summary, basically, the odor complaints significantly reduced, and really this is the result I see of the very holistic approach that was used, and really focusing on getting the landfill gas collection system upgraded and improved, and to make up for the damage that was done to the landfill. And then like I said, the notices of the NOVs that were received, those were can be traced to practices, and Republic has actually improved it beyond industry standards on the drilling and the trenching. And then one power surge, basically, there was basically nothing they can do as of right now, but I'm still following up on that with Southern California Edison directly. From the standpoint of the local enforcement agency, the alternative daily cover and the intermediate cover has been incorporated into the joint technical document, which is a standard operating practice now. And we know that it works very well to increase the landfill gas collection. So that's a permanent part. So just in conclusion, basically, the science-based, systems-based, science-based approach has worked. And we've been sharing this with the state and collaborating with NASA, JPL, and Caltech. So thank you.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Bruin, any questions?
No questions.
Board members, questions? Ms. Bird?
I just have one question. You mentioned that some of the standard practices were included, and you specifically mentioned the ADC and the ICE. That didn't include the practice of delayed opening.
No, because
That was not.
no, the local enforcement agency left the operating hours at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. because from our data, and I've shown you this before, the odors being complained of is landfill gas, and operating hours has nothing to do with landfill gas odors. It's always going to be there. It's a matter of how good the landfill gas collection system is.
Okay, so
Talk about operating hours, you're primarily worried about the fresh trash odors, and almost all the odor complaints are landfill gas odors. And I took a look at the what was reported as fresh trash odors, as reported by the community, and I actually did the data mining analysis on that. But in what we call critical flaws analysis, we have found that probably over 50% of the reported fresh trash odors was actually mischaracterized by the community and recharacterized as landfill gas odors by the AQMD inspectors. So if you look at it that way, it's landfill gas odors, and you can look at the times of the complaints. That's tied to landfill gas, and that's why I said the focus, and correctly so, of the abatement order was to focus on landfill gas collection system.
and you're saying that based on the fact that the complaints, most recent complaints came in, what I have here in my notes is in the evenings, basically 10, 11, and
Yes.
8 to 11
Yes.
p.m.
And we know it's working because it's only 2 complaints this last month.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Camarena, and then Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Singh, refineries have a tremendous incentive to keep operating, and they too are vulnerable to power outages and surges. In looking for how to prevent this happening at the landfill, will you be looking at what they do?
Yes, well, I'm working with the utility directly to see what can be done at the utility end and also at the facility end.
At the facility, and you're also looking?
I mean, the Sunshine, yes.
No, well, I'm talking about I think that in addition to looking at Edison or the supplier, perhaps it might be well to look at the consumer, the refinery, to see what they have done to mitigate the impacts.
Okay, thank you.
I do have another question. It came up, or this topic came up a little bit here, but we did have testimony about it last time we were here in March, and I think also in December. And that has to do with NASA and their work. And you told us at that time that NASA had essentially verified the improvements that have been done at the landfill, showing I think it was, you told us a 60% reduction in the flux of methane. Where's the other 40% coming from?
No, let me try to explain that. Do you have that presentation from the last time? So what NASA did was I provided them with the landfill gas collection volume data from the landfill. And like I said, at that time, the landfill gas volumes went up, collection volumes increased by 55%. And what NASA measured independently from the air was a 60% reduction from the start of the program to the date that they gave me that data. So it's a 60% reduction in the flux over a period of 2 years. And that corresponded directly to a 55% increase in the collection volume. The flux in the, I think it was January 2016, was 2,500 kilograms of methane per hour. That was the baseline when they started, and that was 2016. So that was just at the kind of the before the abatement order, and then by the end of 2018, they were down 60% from that baseline. So I actually had a graph from the last one that shows that NASA, they gave me a data plot and how it corresponded to the increase in the collection. And it kind of makes sense. If you increase more gas collected, you're going to see less coming out. So that was the independent verification.
Verification of the effectiveness of the gas collection system.
Yes.
But it also showed that there's some methane coming still.
Yes. And remember what I've always said, no matter how good your collection system is, you can never get 100%, because in order, when you crank up the volume, you can only get so much before you start drawing air into the landfill, and that is an absolute no-no, because once you draw oxygen in, at any point you will start an underground fire, and that is not something you want. So all landfills operate at that very balance, very delicate balance of the maximum volume with the vacuum without drawing in oxygen. So in order to achieve that in balance, you operate positive pressure. That's why all landfills are basically what we call a positive pressure system. And the trick really is to minimize that. And according to NASA, probably about the single largest super emitters in the state are the landfills. And with the improvements done at Sunshine basically is not a super emitter like it was before. It basically almost dropped off the map.
Thank you.
Senator.
Ask for clarification on the joint technical document amendment.
Yes.
He said that 5-year permit review report, 2018, requires public services to update joint technical document. What's this public services?
The Public Resources Code, the statutes require an enforcement agency to review the actual valid ongoing permit every 5 years at a minimum. So, Republic had been operating under a permit for 5 years, and it hadn't been updated for 5 years.
What agencies are represented in the local enforcement agency?
The local enforcement agency is the local entity of the Cal Recycle, which is part of Cal EPA. And the local enforcement
Cal
agency.
what?
Cal Recycle.
Okay.
It's the state regulatory agency that oversees all solid waste management in the state. So the local enforcement agency is the Cal Recycle designated local agency that does the enforcement on behalf of the state. So that joint technical document is reviewed both by Cal Recycle and the local enforcement agency.
So public services submitted an application.
No, Republic Services.
Republic Services.
The local enforcement agency reviews the permit and says, no, you're not operating the way you're doing now. So we're going to require you to amend your current operational document. So that's a request to Republic to rewrite that document to include the current practices that's working well. And so Republic submitted that document in April, and then it was approved in May. And that is now the valid joint technical document or the operational Bible that the landfill has to use.
Okay, so the amendment, what was the amendment, if you can recall, simply put?
The amendment, it basically is an updated operational manual.
Was there any significant difference between the amendment that was approved and prior thereto, requesting the amendment?
Yes, the amendment basically incorporated the use of the alternative daily cover, which really was not in the past document, the intermediate cover enhancements, and to me, more importantly, was basically allowing the peel back of soil if they ever use soil. And then one of the best management practices that Republic came up with is the use of the gabion cubes. That's been I think, a fantastic improvement and a contribution to the industry. That really has helped the landfill gas collection system. So that all those design requirements and changes in how the landfill is to be built into the future, that's all now incorporated in this new document.
So this standard amendment of standard practices,
No, a lot of the stuff in this amendment is not standard industry practice. Like the use of gabion cubes is new, and this is something now that is
but when it was
incorporated.
approved in May 2019, it became a standard practice. Is that not correct?
When it got approved in the amended
was
joint
approved.
technical document, it is now standard practice for Republic, but not standard practice in the industry.
Oh, just for Republic.
They're operating at a much higher standard now than industry.
You were saying something about, continue, Colonel, on the summary conclusion, starting out bullet, odor complaints significantly reduced. Been testified to that we had about, I added 35. I think that Mr. Anderson said something like 76 complaints.
That was in March, and that was due to that act of God where they had that failure in the lightning arrestor, and they had that power surge that fried their computer boards at the landfill.
Well,
That was traced back to one single incident.
Mr. Dorado did not list that 76 complaints at that point in time. He had something like 35. Where did the others come from? If you know.
Well, I don't know what he was alluding to, but I know there was the majority of the 76 complaints was actually tied to that single incident.
Let me just, the testimony is that 26 of the 76 complaints
Okay.
was due to the March 26th.
Yeah, 26.
Okay. Was that the verified one? Yes.
Then what was the others, if you know?
I don't know.
Well, then how could you say odor complaints significantly reduced?
Well, if you take that incident out, which is something that Republic couldn't control, you look at April and May, and especially May, we're down to 2 complaints now.
Does tending have anything to do with you modifying the way collectors are being used today, right?
Could you ask that again, please?
Tenting, can you explain what tenting is all about?
No, there's no tenting going on.
Can you explain what it is?
Tenting is actually where you build a structure over an area that has where you're doing construction. That's used by some landfills, but what Republic has done in terms of drilling is actually to build something better than standard industry practice. They built a bigger, and a more robust vacuum box.
That's true, but you also testified to when they were being modifying the gas collecting system or process, then the odor was being disseminated to the community. So that new technology apparently was not working 100%.
I didn't say that.
Senator, are you referring to the use of tenting for trenching?
It was trenching, yeah. Come on.
Could you ask your question again?
There was
I guess there's many ways to address odors from trenching and drilling.
right.
So the best practice right now is to actually have a more robust, a kind of a landfill gas collector at the where they're drilling, and that's what Republic has done. And what Republic is, and I think they'll you can testify to that they're actually modifying the procedure for trenching, so that when they do trenching, they don't have to basically do tenting, but they can do some other measure. There's many different ways to control odors. As long as they do some form of control of the emissions coming from trenching, then that's doable.
I just want you to ask one simple question regarding Exhibit P15191. I know the person is not here to be questioned, but on dated June 5th, 2019, at 7:47 p.m., it refers to you, Mr. Singh, Dr. Singh. Eugene Singh knew all about tenting while trenching. And when I approached him outside about it, he said that if I would message him to remind him, he would send me more information. He said that's a difficult process.
Yes, she asked, this is Andrea Provenzale. She asked about tenting technology. I said, I actually have drawings of tenting. So I sent it, when she messaged me, I actually sent her documents of tenting procedures and drawings of that was used by other facilities.
She quoted you by saying, he said it is not a widespread practice and could be dangerous. What do you mean by that? You said that.
Well, in high wind areas, a tent kind of will blow away, especially in a wind tunnel area like Sunshine.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Do you know, you mentioned in your testimony that LEA inspectors are present every day at the site, is that correct?
That's a condition of the land use permit.
I just was wondering, Mr. Anderson, when he testified, mentioned 2 dates in March for which there were a significant number of complaints, and at least 2, and on the second date, 4 verified complaints for odor. The first was March 10th, and the second was March 17th. To your knowledge, did the LEA inspector indicate or report any odors on those days?
The LEA has no jurisdiction over odors, so
Okay.
they don't report odors. They get the reports from AQMD and from the landfill.
And to your knowledge, any inspector that was on site, did they note any particular issues or anything that might have occurred differently on either March 10th or March 17th?
That I do not know.
Chair Prusak, just my notes indicate that they were in the evening, and the LEA inspectors are not there in the evening, if I'm not mistaken.
That's helpful to know. Thank you for that.
The LEA is there until they close, which means when the
Thank you for
the
that. Thank you for
ADC
that
goes on.
clarification, and thank you, Mr. Sanchez, for aiding in that clarification. I think I had one other question. Where did I put it? Does anybody else have any questions? Because I do have another question, but I can't find where I have it. Okay, seeing none, just give me one moment to look and see where I might have written this. Oh, this is the question. In response to questions by Mr. Camarena with regard to NASA and the verification and the 60% reduction in what NASA was seeing, you mentioned that there is a certain point with landfills where they can only be so efficient in gas collection, and you showed us with your hands that there's some point at which they have to sort of be very careful not to go into positive pressure, which could be dangerous. Do you believe that the landfill currently in its collection efficiency is at that point? Or do you see that there are significant improvements that could still occur in collection?
Oh, I think they're pretty much at that threshold now. The only time you can get closer to 100% collection efficiency is when the entire landfill is closed. Because when a landfill closes, you actually put on a final cap. And that's when you can really increase the vacuum and you can get collection efficiencies above 90%.
Can you remind us what the efficiency is?
The landfill average is around, around this country is around 75%. That's a default value that's nationally agreed upon in industry and in regulators, 75%.
And what is it at?
At Sunshine, I haven't calculated recently, but it's been around 83 to 85% was my last estimate. So you're getting pretty close to the point of sucking more oxygen in. And I remember in my previous testimony, there was a time when our local enforcement agency actually asked Republic to increase the amount of vacuum as a temporary measure. And during that time period, we actually had we had a significant amount of underground fires, so they had to back off. So we're at that point. Yeah.
Thank you. Senator, questions?
A landfill average around the country, you said, is about what?
75%.
And at the Republic's location, it's about how much?
It's probably closer to 83 to 85%.
Which suggests that the average that affects the public, it becomes a nuisance. Wouldn't that be dependent on the proximity of the individual near that source?
Well, of course, if nobody lives around a landfill, you're not going to get complaints. That's always a factor, is the proximity.
So in this particular case, the landfill average is meaningless as it relates to the environment where this landfill is located.
In terms of
complaints.
Yes, in terms of complaints, but most of those models actually deal with a different odors. Of course, is always a concern, but most of those models and the requirements for the destruction of methane really is built around the damage that methane does to the greenhouse as greenhouse gas. So it's a climate change issue, and that's what the regulations are built around. It requires destruction of methane.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But that's still doesn't determine what the impact is going to be, negative or otherwise, in this neighborhood located near this landfill. I think you understand the point.
Yeah, I understand your point.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Sang?
No further witnesses from the district.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. I know we usually take only one morning break, but our last break, the board was reviewing comments. So let's take a shorter break, but let's take a break until 10 after the hour of 11:10. So we're off the record. We are back on the record, and we've received one additional public comment that we will mark, and that is from Kathleen Anthony, June 6, today, sorry, 9:11 a.m., and we're going to mark that as, it's an email, and we're going to mark that as Public Exhibit P197. And Mr. Bruin, I believe you're going to introduce your witness.
Thank you. So we have one witness, Elena Goodall, who you've heard testify before this board in previous status conferences. And she's going to give a short PowerPoint presentation. So I would like to dispense with the Q&A format as we have in the past and just have her proceed and present the PowerPoint, of course, subject to any questions that Mr. Sanchez or the board might have. So with that, we need to switch over to, hopefully, to Ms. Goodall's computer. There we go. So Ms. Goodall, would you state your name, address, and your title?
Elena Goodhall, ELENAGOODHALL. I'm the Director of Engineering Field Operations for Republic Services.
So you have prepared a PowerPoint, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, would you please proceed to present it to the hearing board? Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair and Board. I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on Sunshine Canyon Landfill's action plan. I'd like to take a moment to refresh you on the significant actions that we have taken since December of 2016. The work that we've completed under the abatement order includes 316 gas extraction points, 9 gabion cubes with 8 wells installed to those cubes, 318 additional gas wells equipped with pumps, 8,000 feet of horizontal collectors installed, 58 acres of vegetative cover completed, 38.5 acres of intermediate spray-on cover installed, 26 acres of closure turf installed, and 12 acres of erosion control matting. Since the last hearing, we have continued to improve our odor control methodology during construction. We have refined our processes by adding additional buffalo monsoons, which, as you might remember, are our mobile odor control equipment that resembles a snowmaker. We've continued to use odor control products sprayed on the excavated waste and quickly moved that excavated waste to the working phase. We've developed daily procedures to assess site conditions to determine whether or not construction should proceed on a daily basis. And we've increased our odor patrols during construction activities to make sure that we can be responsive to any change in site conditions. These refinements allowed us to relocate 8,400 cubic yards of waste during the month of April with no associated odor complaints. During the last hearing, we discussed concerns regarding the construction of horizontal collectors, and we were asked what could we do differently. There were many ideas offered on how to create elaborate odor controls. As we worked through our analysis, we chose to go back to a common engineering principle, which is to eliminate a risk rather than develop a complex engineering solution. As a result, we have looked to develop construction options that are less intrusive into the waste mass. The detail shows one option for still constructing a horizontal collector that is free draining but minimizes disruption to the ground surface. With this alternative type of horizontal collector construction, we would remove the daily cover to expose the top surface of the trash, so any accumulated liquid in the collector would be able to freely drain, but we would not intentionally trench into the waste mass, thus minimizing the amount of open trenching needed for construction. The district's witnesses have discussed the power surge that we experienced in March, and to refer to it as a massive power surge is not an overstatement. It was 85 megawatts, and to help put that in perspective, In 1 year, our gas-to-energy plant produces 20 megawatts, which is equivalent to approximately 20,000 homes. So this massive power surge delivered more than 4 times of the electricity that we generate in a year instantaneously to our system. This impacted our control programming at the plant and at the flare station. We quickly worked to complete several items to get the gas system back online. We replaced equipment that was damaged due to trying to operate the flares after the surge impacted the operating software program. We repaired the impacted operating software, and we did troubleshooting during the startup of that equipment. In the end, that resulted in 23 hours of intermittent operation and downtime. So at the end of the day, that power surge significantly impacted our system, but we were able to get the system back up and running within less than 24 hours. That power surge accounts for 36% of the March odor complaints. So how is our plan working? Some of these graphs should be very familiar to you, as we've presented them before. As a reminder, this graph represents the annual total of complaints from 2006 through today. Although the graph represents all of the odor complaints received, the power surge was completely outside of our control. So when discussing how we're doing, I'm going to focus on the results, not factoring in the 27 complaints associated with the power surge. So the power surge occurred at 8 p.m. on the 25th. So we've actually accounted for the odor complaint that happened that evening after the power surge happened as one of the 27 odor complaints associated with the power surge. As a reminder, the green line on the graph represents the number of complaints that we have received in the last 12 months, or from June 2018 through May of 2019. That 12-month total is 220 odor complaints. This represents a 14% reduction in odor complaints from the same time period, the 12 months before that, which would be from June 2017 through May 2018. So we continue to reduce the number of odor complaints over time. In fact, if you track the green line to the left, the 12-month total continues to be equivalent to pre-2009 levels. So clearly our action plan that we presented to you in March of 2017 is working, and the odor complaints have been significantly reduced.
Can I ask one point of clarification? What does the green line represent?
So the green line is the last 12 months of odor complaints, as opposed to the year to date, or the total for the year. So that represents the number of odor complaints that we've received since from between June 2018 through May of 2019.
Please proceed.
As a reminder, this graph represents the landfill gas collection at the facility since the abatement order began versus the number of odor complaints. The blue bars represent the total number of odor complaints received in a given month. You might notice in the month of March the slightly lighter colored blue, and that represents the total number of odor complaints associated with the power surge. As an example of how this graph should be interpreted, in May of 2017, which is the 7th column over from the left, there were 17 odor complaints, and the landfill gas collection was 15,000 SCFM. Last month, there were 2 odor complaints, and the landfill gas collection was 16,640 SCFM. Similar to the last hearings, we have noted key action plan milestones, and we've updated this graph for the months that have passed since the last hearing. As we have detailed for you throughout these hearings, we continue to identify areas for gas and liquid system expansion and maintenance and augment Republic's action plan accordingly with additional construction activities. This has resulted in a continued significant reduction in odor complaints. What you can see on this graph is that the increased landfill gas collection has resulted in the significant reduction in odor complaints. This graph represents the monthly fluctuations in odor complaints. The months are across the bottom of the graph, and the y-axis represents the number of odor complaints for that month. The red line represents the 3-year average of complaints received from 2014 to 2016. The blue line represents 2017, green is 2018, and orange is 2019. As you can see from the blue, green, and orange lines, from the last 2 years, we continue to have significantly reduced number of odor complaints. Thank you for allowing this time to update you on the site's progress.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. You had no other questions.
I have no other questions of the witness. Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez, any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Ms. Goodall, can you go to slide 5, please? One more.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. So just so I'm clear, so are you technically not doing trenching? You're just going to be laying the pipe on top of the trash, or can you walk us through that again, please?
Sure. So the dark brown area is meant to represent the daily cover soils that are placed on the top of the trash. And so when we go back to do a horizontal collector in an area when our site conditions are not ideal, we propose to only excavate through that soil, barely exposing the trash surface. So we still want that trash, the stone to be in contact with the trash, so that liquids that accumulate in the stone are able to drain freely to the bottom to the leachate collection system. But what we're proposing is that we wouldn't actually excavate 4 feet down into the trash, and thus minimizing the amount of trash that would be excavated out.
Thank you. And is this for all horizontal trenching, or just where you identify it may be an odorous area?
It would be our alternative when site conditions are not ideal and there is potential for nuisance odors.
And can you elaborate, what does that mean, non-ideal site conditions?
It could depend on where the location is or the weather conditions, wind direction, wind speed, barometric pressure, precipitation, etc.
And is there any ideal time to perform this, or is it more dependent on the conditions that you just described?
It would be the conditions that I just described specifically. The wind direction is the primary contributor.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Since you have that up, why not use that alternative in all circumstances? Is it not as good of an alternative in some way?
It does limit the radius of influence of the horizontal collector. It won't apply the same level of vacuum below the collector, but it will have the same effectiveness above the collector.
And is it possible instead to just wait and do trenching at a time when the wind and direction and speed and meteorological conditions are good?
In certain times of year, that is a possibility, and that is actually how we approach the work in April. But there are times of year where the collector would need to be constructed, but there may be not an ideal wind condition.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Camarena?
Thank you. Ms. Goodall, traditional horizontal collectors that are buried in the trenches, they seem to be susceptible to the settling of the landfill and damage. This approach, will that still be the same, less, or more?
It would be the same. Horizontal collectors are typically a temporary interim solution until we can put the vertical well in.
Thank you.
Senator.
Massive off-site power surge in March. Looking at that one. Page 6. You mentioned here that the software was damaged. Software, correct?
Correct,
And the software, that consists of circuit boards?
correct.
They were zapped?
Yes. Basically, it's the same kind of concept if you had a power surge at your house and your computer was plugged into the wall without a surge protector.
Did you have another circuit board on standby, slip it right in? Or?
I believe that it was more associated, so when the power surge happened, we did have to reload the software, but while we were trying to operate the system, there was some pieces of equipment that were damaged due to the faulty software that needed to be repaired as opposed to the actual
You had to go
circuit
through
boards.
and troubleshoot the thing.
Yes,
You didn't have a replacement. Those circuit boards, you just snap one out, put another one in. You didn't have that.
at the end of the day, we had to reload the software.
All in 23 hours, huh? Annual odor complaints, last 12 months. That green line represents 12 months, huh?
Yes, the last 12 months.
So for 2018, you had a number of 200 complaints.
208 in 2018.
2018.
Yes, in 2018, we had 208 odor complaints.
And you had 19, a little less than, a little more than half.
Correct.
And how would you notify of those complaints? And what the district have the same number of complaints certified?
Typically, those odor complaints come to us via the district. These represent the odor complaints that the district received through their
district had.
process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about March of 2019, and it just because it's very atypical for the performance in the last, well over a year at least, to have 50 additional. I know 26 had to do with the power surge. And there were the two dates that were identified by Mr. Anderson where there were actual verified complaints, which was March 10th and March 17th. Do you have any explanation of what might have occurred on those dates?
So when we get the odor complaint information, we go through a very extensive process of analyzing each and every single odor complaint, looking for a potential source, wind direction, etc. So what I can tell you for the month of March is out of the 76 odor complaints, if we remove the power surge, that there was 49 odor complaints. Of those, 30 of those were responded to by the district, and 24 of them were confirmed with no odor. So that left the 6 that's been in reference. 2 of those occurred on March 10th, and 4 of them occurred on March 17th. Both of those are Sundays. We have not been able to identify anything that was happening at the landfill that would have resulted in a peak of odor complaints in those 2 instances. But we have, as part of our analysis, noted that there is an increase in odor complaints on Sundays and Mondays, with Monday being collection day. So Sunday, people are setting out their trash at the curb, and on Monday, it's being picked up. But we have not been able to tie that back to anything that's occurring at the landfill.
Can you clarify what you just said about Sundays and Mondays and putting out trash and pickup? Do you mean in the immediate community?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know, though, of the verified complaints? I assume it was, to be verified, it would have to be traced back to the landfill itself. Isn't that correct, from what you understand?
That is my understanding, but we have not been able to identify anything at the facility that would have been a source.
No ongoing construction.
No, not on Sunday.
Anyone else have questions? Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Goodall.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay. Then we will at this time, I think, take public comment. And we will begin with Ms. Jessica Strobel, who is representing the LA City Council District 12. And if you would come to this podium over here and do a few things. First of all, make sure to turn on the microphone. You will be given 5 minutes to speak. And if you could just state your name for the record, spell it before your time starts, and just indicate that when I administered the oath that you took the oath this morning.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Strobel. That's spelled Jessica. Last name Strobel, Strobel. And I did take the oath this morning. And so just quickly, I don't believe I will need my full 5 minutes. I wanted to thank you for allowing our testimony right now. I am here on behalf of Councilmember Greg Smith. I am his Deputy Chief of Staff. He oversees the Northwest San Fernando Valley, for those of you who are not quite sure, and that is the community that is directly south of the landfill. So I am here, obviously, to represent the community concerns. It's been brought up that while we do get emails from the public, that it is hard since they are not able to attend always, and so the council member thought it would be good to have somebody out here to represent the constituency as he does, and that is my job here today. The council member was council member from 2003 to 2011, and then retired and now is back, so he is very aware of what has happened at Sunshine Canyon over the years, and he also sees what it could be. So when we started receiving more community concerns about operating hours, especially if the order of abatement is to end and the operations can begin at 6 a.m., the community started emailing and calling our office with concerns about that, and so we just wanted to pass along what our office is hearing as well. You know, it's not scientific. We're not Eugene, but we do try to make sure that the community has a voice. It's always hard in Los Angeles. We're far northwest. It is removed, and again, it's removed to coming to Diamond Bar for the community to be able to come and talk. So we wanted to make sure that that concern was brought before the hearing board of that there is definite community concern, and they've been reaching out, through the normal Sunshine Canyon CAC and other channels, but they have been reaching out to our office as well. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Mr. Sanchez?
No question. Thank you, Ms. Strobel.
Mr. Bruin, any
No, thank
questions?
you.
Board members, any questions for Ms. Strobel? Senator?
Greg Smith,
Yes.
he's the guy who worked for Hal Burnson.
Yes. He's back. Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms.
you.
Strobel. A question, I'm sorry, Mr.
Yes.
Camarena has a question.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, and that is that there were 17 days of hearings in this matter before we issued the order for abatement. And I think at least 2 of those days, the hearings were held on a Saturday in the community in order to give the community a better opportunity to tell us what's going on.
Thank you for doing that consideration for the community. Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you to the council member for having you come and appear today. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call, in order of how I have them, Mr. Wade Hunter. After Mr. Hunter, I will call Mike Mahajer, and after that, I will call William Huntley. So beginning with Mr. Wade Hunter.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Mahajer is on a conference call and won't be available until 12 o'clock. If you can't make it back and he's not able to read his testimony, he did submit his testimony, and he just on page 2 of 2, half of the last paragraph was therefore.
Can you just tell us what it is? Do you know what it's been marked, his testimony?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take your testimony, and then we'll take the last witness, and if Mr. Mahajer has not returned, you may come back and read whatever part of his testimony you wish to do.
Madam Chair, I have it as P195.
Thank you very much. So P195. Okay. And Mr. Wade Hunter, who represents the North Valley Coalition of Concerned Citizens, will be given 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Wade Hunter. It's W-A-Y-D-E, Hunter, H-U-N-T-E-R. I'm the president of the North Valley Coalition of Concerned Citizens, Inc., and I've been sworn. I did give you the green folder. That's mine. And in it, I started out with, as we have always done for the hearing board, we've included the most currently available SQMD website charts, the ones that you were desirous of looking at. And as a matter of fact, under the orange tab, if you look under Exhibit AC of the orange tab, you'll see March and April there, and you can see what was called in at what time. Under my conclusions and recommendations, we understood that your authority was going to end June 30th, 2019, and we kind of assumed this might be our last meeting. And while you've done an excellent job in making Republic substantially reduce the odors, they have not eliminated them, and believe that your failure to reduce the hours of operation permanently to 9 a.m. and or by extending them and or your authority will be back here again in a few years as the landfill operations move back to the east and closer to our homes. What we do know is that meteorological conditions that persist, they persist daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly, and they do exist, and they're never going to change, and that they were recognized by the AQMD's own expert, Dr. Sang-Mi Lee, in her report titled Meteorological Factors Triggering Odor Episodes and dated November 2nd, 2016, in which he concluded that considering diurnal variations of wind speed, direction, and vertical mixing, a delay of at least 2 to 3 hours after sunrise would help to mitigate the transport of odor-laden plume from the landfill to community, and that's under the red tab, Exhibit A. We talk about maintaining the late opening. I'm going to just change a little bit from what I wrote down just to make it a little bit shorter, but basically we've raised the issue here. We made a point of asking for the late opening because the community wholeheartedly believed it contributed to the decline in odors, but they fear that Republic's plan to move the working faces once again to the east and closer to our homes, and that if they return to their early morning opening, along with such activities as staging long-haul trucks, grading, cell construction, tow berm construction, we'll be back here again debating with the public as to what is causing early morning odors. At least with a late opening, it eliminates one of those potential variables. And at least if it's happening, you can say, hey, it's happening because of this and not because of some of the other things. Again, in March, I pointed out that they did not address when we asked them about when coming back, they really didn't answer. Is this working?
Do we need to switch?
Is it on? I'd like to show.
Yeah, Madam Clerk is working on it.
Thank you. There's just it's a picture of one of theirs that they've produced, but I want you to understand what we're talking about. Okay, let me see here. Oh, man. Can't get it. Okay, if you look at the landfill right now, if you could see the city-county line runs right diagonally through the middle of that landfill, all their operations right now are on the county side. They've moved as far away as possible. And one of the things that's happening is, if you notice that green line that comes around in like a toe that comes down to the bottom right-hand corner, that's where the operations are going to come back to, okay? That's our neighborhood. And all those pictures that they've been showing of the sites of the landfill, and you're looking at, and they're saying, this is how it's built up. What you don't understand is what you see in the foreground is a blank area like this here. This area looking at in front here and up here, this very last one, all that's going to be filled. And all of that is coming to our neighborhood over here. okay, right down into this area. And that's the big fear for everybody, and that's the reason why we wanted to maintain, because there is outgassing. I've given you information that says even with best 85% collection is all they're going to get, so you're just going to get 15% of outgassing. I looked at some of the trash coming in, and in that case, we turned around 77.5% of all the trash coming in is organic, which means that that is a big problem. And the last thing I'll close, that kind of
Yes, I was
delay-
going to say, take a few more seconds.
Oh, thank
given-
you, because that delayed me a little bit there.
Give another minute.
The meteorological conditions, what is needed, there needs to be a study done to determine the impacts. In fact, one was proposed and submitted by Republic to the AQMD under an order for abatement notice 3448-13, condition 7A, and dated May 24, 2010. However, that portion of the study, which would, and I quote, simulate various airflow scenarios, that's wind conditions and drainage flow phenomena, and will allow for the quantification of the patterns of air movement around and through the region of interest, and that's the landfill facility and the developed areas in the valley as far south as the facility as the Robert Frost Middle School. The subsequent models will also be used to evaluate the efficacy of the mitigation measures for future landfill use scenarios, and that's placement of refuse, future workplace locations, and elevation changes to the landfill as it is filled. And this appears to not have been done. And that's one of the things that you see, that's what we're afraid of. They're coming back. And they're not talking about it, and they don't want to talk about it. And we said the only thing that's protecting us, those winds are coming exactly 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock every morning, and then in the evening it turns around 6 o'clock to at least 9 o'clock in the evening. The winds are right off that landfill. They've got outgassing, continue to do any type of operations they're doing because they're coming closer to us, we're going to get the impact. It's not going to change. And if we don't do it now, we're going to be back here again. So thank you very much. I'm sorry
No, thank you, Mr. Hunter, for your testimony. Mr. Sanchez, any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Hunter.
Mr. Bruin, any
No
questions?
questions.
Board members, any questions? Senator?
You said they're coming back again?
Yes. The landfill, can you see this on this drawing here? This blue line, the green line around here is the extent of the landfill when it's fully developed. It was a 90 million ton expansion. Okay, it was approved by the city and the city, and it came back. They went the county side, and then they reopened the city side in 2006, and that's when all our problems started, when they came down to this side. Okay, now they have been doing things like you talked about, making them do, but they also moved their operations, and you can see where those gabion cubes and things are. That's where they're operating up there. They moved it as far away as they could get, actually to the other side, to the county side. But they're going to come back right down to that, see where that toe is right down here? They're going to come back. So that means that they have to have working faces and things right there. They have to be doing trenching. They have to do all kinds of things, all the operations that it takes to bury trash. And you can't take fresh trash. If you go to the landfill now, you can smell it. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Senator, do you have another question?
The populated area, is that adjacent to the county or the city's dump site?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
The population of the residents.
Oh, all of us live, most of us live in the city.
So therefore, the adverse effect up to date in terms of number of complaints at the very beginning is coming from the dumping in the county side.
When the county was operational, which it opened in 1996, and it continued to operate with very few problems, so that it's everything that's on the county side was not a problem. When that problem started was when the city side opened in 2006. Okay, that's when the problem started because the operations now moved down into the city side. Now they're doing.
May I ask you a question? What part of this operation as currently exists that's near the city? Where's the city on that?
On this thing here, here's the city-county line right here. All the side is the city side.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And you see where this is in here, this is what they got to develop. They got to develop this whole area.
Where the people living? Where's the residents?
Just south of here. You can't see my hand, but the bottom, if you take it diagonally.
I see, okay, thank
And there are some other maps included inside my, my handout here where I show you the relationship between the various entities and the school and everything. I have those in there because I was so concerned.
And we have seen those maps.
Okay.
So they are included.
Is it Councilman Greg Smith is aware of this pending operation?
I think everybody is. I can't say.
All right,
you know,
fine, Dan, I got that, man.
Any other questions for? Thank you, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, and I'm
Okay,
sorry to abuse the privilege, and we are sorry to hear about the doctor. I spent a lot of time with him too. I think this is the 22nd hearing. I've been for every hearing and then some. So we'll miss him.
Thank you. And I'll call Mr. William Huntley, and then if Mr. Mahajer has not returned, Mr. Hunter, you may read portions of his testimony. Mr. Huntley, if you could just state and spell your name and indicate you took the oath.
William Huntley, William Huntley. I did take the oath. I was going to get up here and talk about all the smells and all the stinks, but I think everybody knows what we've done and what we've been through and what we tolerate. And I think part of the numbers for people complaining gets limited because no one knows how many people have moved out of the area because of the stink. They just gave up. So the people you see that send you this information are names that you continually see sending in the information that want to stay in the area, that want to do the right thing. I think that what's happening now is we're looking at it. I'm praying that our friends are doing the right thing. And Eugene had a long talk with me and explained a lot of things that they're doing that should help. In the long run, I've got 23 years as a food safety consultant, and right now, I know that when I trust a corporation to do what they're supposed to do, they fail. They go with the profit side, not with the fair side. They don't look at human beings. They don't live in our area. So at the end of the day, the stink is the stink, and if you don't live with it, then you really don't want to solve the problem. But I'm willing to keep giving them another chance. I mean, they want another chance. They want to stay there. I think they're just going to stack that stuff up, and I'm just going to smell that dump again sometime, and then they're going to get complaints. And that's the way I guess you have to look at it, unless you just pack it up and move out and let somebody else move in, and then you tell them, well, the dump is there and the smell does come over occasionally, because we still have to tell them, or we're going to get sued at the end of the day. So as far as I'm concerned, I guess we trust them again. We got to trust the corporations because they're keeping some people employed. I hope it's going to change, but ultimately I know that every time I come to one of these meetings, 1 week later, the stink is back. So I don't know what that's about. I do not understand. After I come in and say, they're doing a good job, they turn around and they don't do a good job. So I don't know. And I understand when you have a problem with electricity. I understand when you have certain things happen. But as I tell people in the food industry, you have to be ready for that to happen. Because if you're not ready for it to happen, shame on you. Because there's people who are going to be suffering, and you didn't take into consideration all of the issues that could happen by something. Thank you.
That was perfectly timed. Just make sure there's no questions for you. Mr. Sanchez, any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Huntley.
Mr. Bruin?
No, thank you.
Board members, any questions? Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Mohajer has not returned. So, Mr. Hunter, would you like to take, in his 3 minutes, the opportunity to read from his testimony? And as Mr. Sanchez pointed out, I believe it was 195, P195.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, and I won't abuse the privilege. And yes, it was P195. He did submit a copy. As I said, he was on the call, and he said he'd be finished at 12. But he said if he just asked me, on page 2 of his submittal, he just asked if I would read into the record. He said, therefore, he makes an argument, but he says, therefore, it is respectfully requested that in order to continue to protect public health and the well-being of the neighboring residents and school children, the prohibition/restriction on dumping and landfilling of solid waste between the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. weekdays and on Saturdays be retained by the hearing board and/or SQMD through appropriate mechanisms until the disposal of organic waste at SCL is reduced by 75%, consistent with the requirements of Senate Bill 1383, Chapter 395 of the 2016 state statutes known as the, quote, short-lived climate pollutants, methane emissions, dairy and livestock, and organic waste landfills. And he said, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I won't ask for questions because Mr. Mohajer is not present. Is there any other member of the public who do not give a speaker card who wishes to be heard? I see none. Mr. Sanchez, are you prepared to give your closing? Would you like a few moments?
I think I'm ready, Madam Chair. The district wanted to hear the testimony today, get additional explanations of the increased odor complaints in March, but what was most important for the district to put in evidence for the board and for the community to hear is that we did conduct additional investigation because we weren't planning on coming here today and keeping our fingers crossed and hope that, somehow the board would lose sight of, what historically has been happening and just focus on what was currently happening and determine that that was going to be a basis to continue the order. So we conducted that independent investigation, reduced the number of complaints that we would receive to respond. Because if we found something that was a source that may be contributing to ongoing orders, we wanted to be prepared today. We wanted to discuss that with the landfill in advance. We didn't want to be here having the board, having us speak outside, negotiate on the spot. We wanted to be prepared. But what we did find out is after they identified the issues from the trenching and they modified their process in doing that, the complaints cut down again. We did have a bad month in March, and we did independently, as well as our expert, Mr. Sang, identified that it was a power surge that resulted in that spike in complaints, which resulted in an odor complaint. And it shouldn't be lost on the board and the community. Even though we got 26 complaints, we were only able to verify 7. So our process remains a challenge. We remain committed to it. But I think with the emails that we saw from the community about their understanding of our reduction in need of complaints to respond during off hours, I think that conveys the integrity of this community and the credibility of the complaint response system. Despite members of the community knowing that we would come out within one complaint, it didn't result in an abuse of the system. It didn't result in a failure of the district. It verified that when there is an odor event, the district will respond, and when there is an odor event, the community will complain. So if you look at the last 2 months and you see 12 and 2 complaints, that's consistent of where we're at, and that demonstrates evidence that the order should expire as originally scheduled. The district has, come short when this first started in 2010, we thought we had remedied the situation. We did not. We went through multiple amendments to the order. So in 2016, when we came back before the board, we spent significant resources. We were extremely dedicated. And when the board asked the parties to ramp up some of the conditions that we originally proposed, we agreed to do so. And that did remedy the situation. There were some stumbles across the way, and we've had some stumbles recently, but the district isn't going anywhere. The LEA isn't going anywhere. Our involvement in the local committees and technical committees and our response to complaints will remain the same. And so, as testified today, Wade Hunter acknowledged this is one variable. The district, and I've reiterated many times, we're not comfortable to identify one condition as the sole remedy for this. It is a combination of things. Some of these things will remain in place, and some of them may drop off. But I would hope the board and the community has confidence that if we return to that situation, we will react accordingly. We will spend the resources that are needed, and we've demonstrated our dedication to want this to be no longer an ongoing public nuisance. Odors have been reduced, and so based upon that and the authority by this board under an order for abatement, the district, based upon the evidence, does not see ongoing evidence of an ongoing public nuisance to substantiate continuing this order. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Mr. Bruin, your closing.
Thank you. Well, I first became involved in hearings before this hearing board in 2011, when this board was looking at an amendment to its original abatement order regarding Sunshine Canyon in 2010. And it's interesting, if you go back in history and look at the very first abatement order approved by this hearing board, it provided for the use of alternative daily cover at the landfill in lieu of soil as a means recommended by the local enforcement agency to assist the landfill in controlling odors. And a few months later, the district had to go back before this hearing board and ask for an amendment of that abatement order because the county had issued a proclamation in the meantime, even though they were at the original abatement hearings, requiring the landfill to place 9 inches of compacted soil on the waste every day at the end of every operating day. And things at the landfill improved for a while under that abatement order, but ultimately we started to get more gas emissions, and the thought was, well, what's going on? This hearing board has heard a lot of testimony about the fact that placing the 9 inches of compacted soil on the working face of the landfill on a daily basis over time resulted in a honeycomb of compacted soil cells surrounding trash. And that meant that water, leachate inside those cells couldn't move anywhere except down a well when a well was drilled. It also meant that gas produced within that cell couldn't be adequately collected by the gas collection system, and so we were having increased surface emissions. And as Mr. Singh and our expert witnesses have testified, we believe it was a result of that requirement principally that caused the original abatement orders to fail. Now, I'm not trying to blame this on the county and say that they were, had the wrong intent here. I think they had every intent to try to address odor issues. It was just a bad idea, as it turned out. But I think it may get lost in all of the discussion before this hearing board, but this hearing process has resulted in one incredibly important result, and that is through the actions of this hearing board and these hearings, and the actions of the district staff and the actions of the LEA and Mr. Singh, we have convinced the county to not impose this requirement on the landfill again. And I can't underscore how important that is. I'm not saying that the other order abatement measures that we've adopted are not equally important, but I think that is a huge result and a permanent benefit from these hearings. The other thing I'd like to say, and just echo the fact that We have revised our joint technical amendment, as Mr. Singh mentioned, to incorporate our current operating practices in the joint technical document. It's an operating manual for the landfill, but what's important to consider is that the joint technical document is a permit condition. It is a condition of the solid waste facilities permit for this landfill, which we need in order to operate the landfill, that we comply with our joint technical document. So that's a big deal, and so I know that this board has been urged by the community to continue the abatement order in effect, but it's not like the LEA is going away. And it's not in any way that my client intends to change its operating practices, because we're not going to. And more importantly, we've put it in our permit conditions, so it's an enforceable condition by the local enforcement agency. I would like to respond to one comment Mr. Hunter made about my client not doing the meteorological study, which was required by the 2010 abatement order. They did do it. They did 2 iterations of it. I was at the meeting with district staff and the district's meteorologist when the study was presented to the district, and I believe that study cost close to $200,000 because they had to prepare a new air modeling program to model wind patterns in the area. So it's not true that we didn't comply with that abatement order in that respect. In closing, I'd like to say that we concur with the staff's position regarding the continuation of the abatement order. We do not believe the site is a continuing nuisance. We believe the last 2 years have shown that normal operating conditions at the landfill are not giving rise to notices of violation. And so with that, unless the board has any questions, I'll close.
Thank you, Mr. Bruin. Before we deliberate and discuss, first of all, I want to remind us all what we're deliberating on. There is no request to modify the existing stipulated order for abatement, and the discussion about extension would be anything that we as a board would determine should be a modification, but it would have to be under certain circumstances. So I think at this time, I know at the beginning of all of these hearings, and the beginning of 2 years ago when this abatement order was put into place, I and Mr. Camarena had discussed to the public what the authority of this board is and is not in this circumstance. And I've not found it necessary in past hearings to reiterate that, because we do tend to see the same faces that come to testify, and as a result, we assume that those who are here know and understand. But we did receive a substantial number of public comments from new people, and again, I express gratitude, and so does this board, for all public participation in the form of comments and testimony. But one in particular, the last one that we received, P197, I just wanted to address it and again reiterate what the authority of this board is, because I think it's very important in whatever action we do or do not take today. And just to paraphrase that commenter, mentioned that the abatement order should continue beyond June 30th, but also things such as Sunshine must be shut down, more testing needs to be conducted. There was a mention of relocation of the landfill to the desert, et cetera, and not commenting on the merits of any of that. I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind the public what we can and cannot do, because we have such very limited authority. This board has no authority to shut down a landfill. We cannot order that a landfill be moved or relocated elsewhere. Outside of an order for abatement, we cannot regulate in any way the operations of a landfill or any facility that is within the South Coast District. And so our authority is only in terms of an order for abatement. And where orders of abatement are concerned, we only have 2 options for authority or regulation through an order for abatement. One is a stipulated order for abatement, and that's where the parties agree on the conditions of the order, and the board approves it after extensive hearings, etc. But no violation of any district rules or nuisance state rules need to be found or are found. And then there's a contested order for abatement where a violation would have to be found, but it would have to be a current and continuing violation. And that's important because I just wanted to remind the public that what we have here is a stipulated order for abatement that was put into effect in late 2016, I believe, and has been in place since then. And so that, on its own terms, was set to expire at the end of this month. If this board wanted to extend it for any reason, or the conditions of the order for any reason, this board would have to take it upon itself to hold additional hearings and find that there is a continuing nuisance that still exists. And I wanted to be clear, we're not here to find or regulate or control or even consider such things as odors unless they rise to the level of a public nuisance. We can't consider future conditions, including when the siting of the working face will come closer to the community in the future, or after the expiration of an order, whether the conditions that they're currently under, including the delay in opening, is repealed. We cannot consider that because it's not current conditions. So the only thing we can look at is whether there is a continuing nuisance, which we couldn't make a final decision on today because we'd have to give the parties an opportunity for additional testimony, additional hearings. But I think we should make that deliberation now and decide whether or not we feel that what we've heard is substantial and adequate evidence to find that it isn't likely that there is a continuing nuisance currently. And nuisance, I mean public nuisance, not odors, because I do understand that there are some continuing concerns. We have, throughout all these hearings, had significant testimony and evidence that the efficiency of the gas collection system, which is clearly responsible for a significant number of odors, has increased, the efficiency has increased substantially. And we heard evidence today from Mr. Tseng in particular about the average 75% efficiency, and that currently this landfill is operating at a higher efficiency, which Mr. Tseng noted is necessary in order for catch-up. However, that it is. And we have seen the charts that show the drop-off in complaints. We also have received evidence regarding complaints. It is troubling that there are more complaints than there have been in a very long time in March. But we have not seen notices of violation other than for non-continuing types of odors. We saw at the last hearing, we saw the drilling issue, we saw the trenching issue. We heard today that those have been addressed in various ways. We have not seen a continuation. And we heard the power surge. Those are the three NOVs in the last two hearings that have been presented, and the only NOVs that have occurred. And I don't think it can be questioned that the number of complaints have significantly dropped. I continue to believe that the delayed opening of the landfill, given the meteorological conditions, is a big factor. And we did hear in the last hearing that the third-party odor monitor did find significant finding of the study was that complaints were minimized when the landfill did not accept any trash deliveries between 6 and 9 in the morning. However, we cannot speculate. that is in place currently, and we are not seeing nuisance conditions from the evidence that has been presented. And so, unfortunately, we cannot continue. I don't believe we have a basis to continue an order for abatement past the date stipulated to without agreement unless we can have more than, unless we can find nuisance conditions. And unfortunately, having that in place does not allow us to find out how significant that factor is. Well, I would say fortunate or unfortunate. So, board members, I open it up for further discussion, but given everything that we've heard today, I'm not inclined at this time to take further action because I don't find evidence of a continuing nuisance. Mr. Camarena.
Thank you. I too feel that way. In December of 2016, this board completed 17 days of hearings over a period of about 3 months, and issued an order setting into motion a number of actions at the landfill. 4 months later, the last notice of violation was issued, and that was April of 2017. The last one, except for these 3 that we've heard about recently, for which there is a fix that has been implemented, at least in the 2 of them. The one having to do with the drilling and the other with the trenching. The trenching, it appears that that Republic has at least one option that they may implement in any future collectors that might need trenching. So I think, first of all, those are not continuing situations. Those are one at a time, for which in one case the fix has been implemented, and the other there appear to be some fixes that will be effective. The third violation was issued as a result of a problem that the operators of the landfill had no control, and that's the very substantial power surge. Mr. Singh pointed out to us that, I'm sorry, I think it was, well, several people have done this. This landfill will always be a potential for odors. There are things that can and some will occur, which can result in temporary odor events. These might be fires, so, incidents that would result in damage to the equipment, such as fires, lightning, flood, earthquake, another power outage, or even a truck accident within the landfill. These are all potentials that could, at some point in the future, result in some odors, but what we're looking at now is not a continuing situation. I think that the power outage was a good reminder of the effectiveness of the landfill gas collection system. I also have some concern about the movement of the working face sometime in the future. That is not something that we can deal with through our authority, but something that I believe that the government entities as well as Republic will take a careful look as they make their plans to move that working phase. Otherwise, we're going to be back here and with another order for abatement. All in all, I think that at this point in time that the continuing violations of the nuisance regulations have come to, well, we don't have any. We haven't had any for some time except for the 2 incidences for which we have some solutions that are being implemented.
Thank you for that. Additional discussion, Senator?
Things have gotten better. You came in as a very bad neighbor. You're better than you were in terms of all the corrections to the problems that have been made. But that was due to the fact that we put limits and restrictions, limits on the tonnage, we put limits on the hours of operation. If this order of abatement expires, what's the assurance that those conditions will be adhered to? If you're not adhered to, then what? You just go back, round the circle, merry-go-round, go round and round and round, which could be a real problem. I don't have any assurance that you would commit it to adhere to those conditions set by the board doing the order. The County of Los Angeles Public Safety. It wasn't public safety, it was one of the departments there. Cited you for operating outside the limits of the permit. Maybe, I believe it's been your outfit, maybe. During one of the hearings, I think that came up. Building and safety. It was building and safety. Okay, well, let me just say this. It was my understanding that was your outfit, but maybe if it's not, you're shaking your head no. But what I'm saying is this. We got a lot of exhibits from the public complaining about what's likely to happen here today, expressing in no uncertain terms that if this order should expire, what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to their neighborhood, their property values, their health, which we never had a health study anyway. We had some health problems, but not a health study. Anything that bothers me is that we're not giving them a fair hearing. The public is not getting a fair hearing. If you want to find out whether or not they continue to complain, let's have a hearing in the community. Hear what they have to say about the complaints that not verified. They made complaints, but not verified. Why were they not verified? Did we get there in time? Did the order disappear? Vanish at the time the inspector got out there where he couldn't verify? I'd like to hear from the public, and if it turns out that everything is okay, I'm on your side. I'll be voting with you on this issue. But until then, and the public official have a representative here, Mr. Greg Smith, an honorable man, serving for many years the city of Los Angeles, involved in the county's operation and the people. You see, the public officials, LEA, and its members, they take the heat on a local level, which you probably you can't relate to because you're not in their position and they're not in yours. And you do what you do because you represent your industry. They do what they do because they represent the people and the people's interests and their health and their environment in which they live So I must tell you that you've done a fair job now. But I would hate to roll back the clock and then have us come back here again. If we were to have a hearing in the community, hear from them one last time, then I could very easily find a way to be on your side on this issue, on this proposal. But until then, I don't think I could be with you. As much as I appreciate the fact that you made some progress, but we still got a lot of complaints, unverified. We're going to blame for the fact that those complaints are not verified. Was the district at fault? Were the people at fault? They blamed that they had an odor, but they didn't have it all. They wouldn't do that. Maybe they would, but I'm not thinking that they would. Okay, that's all I have to say on it.
Thank you, and I just wanted to point out that we did have, I know you're saying a new hearing in the community. We had several. I just want to be very clear to the public who is watching that this board went out into the community and had several hearings. With regard to complaints and hearing things that we're not seeing, this has been an active issue in this community for many years, and this order for abatement has been in operation for many years. And so this community is well aware of the process of complaining to the district, and what we see from the empirical evidence that we have received is though the number of complaints, verified or not, has been reduced. And the only way that we can make a finding of continuing nuisance is if complaints are made when odors are present, and I'm saying this to the public because the public should know this for the future as well. Complaints need to be made when odors are present so that the district can come, inspectors can come and verify, and if NOVs are issued, that is how this board is able to gather evidence of a continuing nuisance violation. Hearing random discussion after the fact or comments after the fact by community members of various complaints does not aid this board in making a finding of public nuisance, which is more of a legal standard. And I wanted to also say that the district did modify its procedures in the last couple of months. That was testified to today, and Mr. Sanchez mentioned it in his opening, to decrease the number of complaints on weekends and after hours that are necessary before the inspectors would respond to only one complaint to make sure that they were catching all issues. And so I think we have plenty of evidence, and I do not want to give the public any indication at all that the reason why we cannot find evidence is because we're not going to their community.
May I respond? The order of abatement is generated by the fact that you had those public hearings and people were making complaints. And they had a cause. The cause was there for them to make the complaints.
That's not true. It was not because they made complaints at a hearing. It was because they made complaints during the process, and the district verified those complaints and issued NOVs.
That is absolutely correct. But this board was put on notice when you had the public hearing. You had an interest in trying to find out what the people were actually thinking.
And Senator, may I just say, you includes yourself in this board, and so when you differentiate yourself from the board, that's concerning to me as well.
This board includes all 5 of us at the time. I think I'm a member of the board. This board had public hearings, try and get feedback from the public. That was the purpose of it. Now, they didn't make complaints. They couldn't get a complaint verified by the board. That's not the function of the board. But what the board learned, and I got a stack of all that, lots of it, from Sunshine Canyon Landfill, from the public. And
in order to make this comment, you need to give a time frame. We are talking about the present and the number of complaints presently.
And then, well, today we heard about at least 30. I heard about at least 35, could have been more complaints, but they're not verified, 2 or 3. There's a reason why they were not verified. It doesn't mean that they were not legitimate complaints. And all I'm really saying is that the public is interested, has a continuing interest in trying to live in a neighborhood where they don't have a nuisance, just like any of us. And we set some guidelines for the Sunshine Canyon to operate, time limits of operation, loads, and so on. And things have gotten better. Nobody's going to deny that. The question is, excuse me, sir, the question is, will they adhere to those guidelines? Once we have no authority to enforce it. I know that. We have no authority to require them to do that. Will they do it on a voluntary basis? I don't know. But I would like to know what the public is really saying. If they can make a lot of complaints and they not be verified, there's a reason for that. And we have documented the number of complaints that they've made in the past couple of months, in fact. So for that reason, I can't agree with you as much as I'd like to.
Mr. Camarena, and then Mr.
I just have a short question, and that is, given our authority, what do you propose we do today?
I propose that we ascertain the information whether or not there's a continuing nuisance. The way to do that is by having a set of time schedule for a hearing in the district before we make a decision.
We just had a hearing. You mean in the community?
In the community.
And given the type of evidence that we are required to gather of a nuisance, and that being actual notices of violation issued by the district, can you tell us what evidentiary-wise that public hearing in the community would do for us in order to be able to extend this order any longer? I think that the answer is it would not give us the appropriate type of evidence we would need.
Probably, chances are, but the district on notice of trying to inquire to find out why those complaints were not really verified. There's a good legitimate reason for that. I just like to hear from the people.
And we have heard from the people over the last 2 years in a significant amount. Ms. Bird, I'm sorry, I keep proactive.
Oh, it's okay. I've just been trying to jump in, but it's okay. You know, there's a number of things here, and I will say this because I've watched this over the time that I've been here on the board, that many instances, these issues that come before us that are nuisances are really based on zoning issues. And so while we hear them and while I admire that the district works to get things to a point that's acceptable, it's, you know, we get down to zoning issues. I just had to address, I know that this public member was not here who sent the letter, but I happen to live out in that desert. And when somebody says, just send the trash from LA to the desert, wow, that really disturbs me. We all have obligations as citizens, and I can't say that I understand all of what goes into zoning. I know that there are legitimate conditions, there's space issues and limitations, there's income I know that may come from allowing businesses in certain areas. But most of and I haven't gone through every single one of them in my head, but most of the things that have come up as nuisances really are, in my opinion, zoning issues. And at this point, it is what it is. What came first, the chicken or the egg, really doesn't matter. It is what it is. The district has put forth, I think, a very good order. We have agreed to it. The respondent has followed through on what was agreed to. Unfortunately, there are houses near a landfill. It's an unfortunate thing. And so as a result of that, there will probably be ongoing problems. But I'm giving you my opinion. Things will happen, a power surge or some other thing will happen, and you may get some odors in the community. It is unfortunate. I hate to even say it, but it's just that kind of thing. In this particular case, the respondent has put within their permit items that were negotiated with the district to minimize odors, things that have been shown to minimize odors. They may not have gotten rid of all the odors, but they're at a point where they don't rise to the level of what the district would have to be a nuisance based on their policies and their procedures. So that's what we have as a board to look at. That's what we have as a board to vote on. And at this point, in my opinion, our jurisdiction will end based on that idea. It may come back, it's possible, but we don't know that. So it's not a given. There may be some items that can be identified by the district in their ongoing monitoring of the situation, which I'm sure they will, even with the order gone. They'll still have their ears on to the pavement to hear what's going on. So based on those items, I would say that I would accept that our jurisdiction would end at this point.
Senator?
I just want to make it clear. I'm not against you. In fact, when I first joined the board, I made public notice that I voted to support the Sunshine Can Land open up its operation where it is today. We closed Lopez Canyon. I was on the council, and I voted for Sunshine Canyon. I think I told you that. So I'm not against you, per se. Got to have a canyon someplace, a landfill someplace. But at the same time, it's the operation, the way you conduct business in the area. Mr. Smith was there with Burnson at the time they voted for it, along with myself. Because Burnson was this district. He was urging that we support for it. So we did. But we had no idea it was going to grow to be a nuisance. We had no idea. I know at that time that most of the operation would be in the county's area with Antonovich. But now you're migrating to the city, and we put some standards over there. Fine. Hours of operation, tonnage, and so on, to try to give you the idea that you can become a good neighbor if you employ these new standards. But there's no guarantee that you're going to adhere to that once this expires. That would not be showing a good faith effort. Okay? You can't encourage the city, and the county, the lady who replaced Antonovich, to make an effort to shut you guys down altogether. You don't want to do that. I mean, take what you can get. You may not get what you want. You may not get what you want at all times. But take what you can get. And these people cannot, elected officials, cannot be agitated to the extent where they take drastic action. Thank you.
I just wanted to hopefully sum up in just a few thoughts. I just wanted to make it very clear that every member of this board has been very concerned by the concerns of the community, by the complaints of the community, and by the conditions that did exist when this order was originally put in place. That was shown in the repeated hearings that we had, the repeated modifications of this order to address meteorological conditions or complaint conditions or issues that arose throughout the years in which we've been holding hearings. But I just wanted to reiterate that we simply cannot, we just do not have the authority to continue to regulate an entity if there is no present continuing nuisance. And the evidence just simply does not show that, which is very good news. I think what's been expressed and what continues to be very emotional for the board and for the community is the unknown of the future. I think it's outstanding that the community has been so present for these hearings and with their comments, because now the district and Republic are very clear on what those concerns are. And I think there are two major ones that have really risen to the top. One is Van Gogh Elementary and the delayed opening of the Sunshine Canyon landfill, and not peeling that back, given the meteorological conditions. That is a big concern of the community. And the other is moving that working face very close to the community and what's going to happen when that happens, if that happens. But I think we can all take heart in the fact that the district is present, and the district has stated, and the district has made clear that they are committed to staying on top of this. The LEA has said they will continue a presence, although that is not for odors, but it is for the workings that cause the odors to a large extent. And so while we simply do not have the authority, I believe, to take any action today, I do believe the community has been heard, and that there will be oversight as necessary moving forward, or we'll be back here. Does anyone wish to make any closing comments? Mr. Camarena?
I'd like to address some of the comments that were made in some of the emails sent to us this morning. A couple of them had to do with either shutting down the landfill or reducing the tonnage. I think if you look at one of the exhibits, one of the charts in exhibit number 73, it shows clearly that the tonnage and the number of complaints, there's no correlation. However, there is great correlation between the gas collection and the number of complaints, which shows that as you're collecting the gas, the complaints are going down. There was also concern with, I think somebody mentioned that there is some thought for some new development in the area of the landfill, and I would hope that the prospective home buyers are clearly advised as to the situation that exists. Finally, we're here today after quite a few years of since this particular order for abatement was petitioned by the district back in 2016, July, and 25 hearings, public hearings, several of them in the community. We're here with great progress on the reduction of odors, in large part due to the tenacity of a number of individuals in the community who have been here almost every day. They took their time. Why? Because there was a time when you could not go out in your backyard, hold a barbecue, invite your friends, because guaranteed it was going to smell. It still smells once in a while, but it's a lot better than it was.
And that's a good point to end, unless there's other thoughts, because the reason why I think the board is without motion, because we wouldn't need one, determining not to take action, is because we don't have enough evidence for a continuing nuisance, because it has gotten so much better as a result of the order and the hard work of the community and the district and the landfill in implementing. Senator?
Well, the can't take action, or we're not taking action, because the complaints are not verified. Mr. Anderson, air quality supervisor, I believe he said there were 76 complaints. So therefore, there's still complaints in the area. Somebody's saying it's a nuisance, that's why I'm making a complaint. Things are better than they were, obviously, yes. But the complaints are still there. And the people can't go in their backyard or have a barbecue, enjoy the quality of life like most of us. And to them, it's the real problem. But they're thankful for the fact that we've imposed these limitations on the operation. I said, it's true, I'm saying it. You may not get what you want in life, or even in this operation, but you get what you can get. If you demand more, then there's a ways for it not to happen. The power of the local government is state government. If they don't enforce those powers, it reverts to local government. And local government can make a lot of decisions about what kind of business that are conducted in an area where they have jurisdiction. I'm sure you got to be aware of that. As the guy who sat on the council and voted on your behalf, I know that to be a fact. So all I can do is be nice to you and tell you these conditions that have been put in place, try and adhere to them if you possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last thing I'm just going to say, and then I'll call to see if anybody has a motion. I just wanted to say, we're all very concerned about odors and complaints, but we don't have the authority to simply regulate odors and complaints, only public nuisance. And I also wanted to say to the public, yes, there are some very important measures that could be undone when this order ends. But one of the most significant measures that cannot be undone, that is permanent, is the improvement, the significant improvement in the collection efficiency of gas at the landfill, which was much of the problem. So with that, I'm going to ask if anybody wishes to make any motions with regard to modification or anything of that sort. And seeing none, we will end this matter with taking no action on the stipulated order for abatement as it stands, which is set to expire since the landfill is in compliance with all of the conditions of the order at the end of this month. Anything else before we adjourn? There is no motion, unless you want to make a motion. Well, if you'd like to make a motion, you may make one.
I make a motion that we have a hearing post haste in the district, in the community where this problem exists.
Is there a second? There is no second, and I'll just state very quickly why I do not second that, and it is not to foreclose any public comment. It is merely a reflection of the fact that we have overwhelming evidence in the form of the complaints that were made through the process that they have been greatly reduced, and I see no evidence of a continuing nuisance. Any other business before we adjourn?
Let's not forget to thank the staffs, especially the inspectors, to thank the people at Republic who have worked very hard to comply with the order, and to the tenacious members of the public who are still here. And that's what brought this all together.
I echo that as well. Okay, so if there is no other business, and Mr. Sanchez, of course, for all of his
Let's not forget
diligent work.
Mr. Sanchez. He smiles nicely.
With no other business, I'm going to adjourn in honor, again, of Dr. Roger Lerner. We are adjourned.
Well,